Ramune, the drink of civilization and enlightenment. And I've written a little talk about, a tasting, Bunmei Kaika, civilization and enlightenment. Kind of the beginning of westernization. You might think of trains, or you might think of telegraphs, or steam engines, or kind of modern inventions. But something that really affected the lifestyles, not just of the rich and famous, but of common people, and children as well, was something like, soft drinks, carbonated drinks, which were the first time introduced in Japan in the 1870s. But Ramune was high fashion. You might not think of it now. Now, Ramune is nostalgia. People have Coca-Cola and all that sort of stuff, but Ramune seems to think, we have to do omatsuri, we go to the shrines, and we enjoy the summer omatsuri, we have Ramune. Drink that. It's a kind of nostalgic drink. But that's nostalgia now, but in the Meiji period it was new, it was fashionable, it was cool. But what's the connection between Ramune and anime? That's our title of our course. And it's a little bit sort of history from the past to the present. Like, from alpha to omega, that type of beginning to end. It has that meaning, and it sounds nice together, doesn't it? Ramune anime, kind of rhymes a little bit. But I want to show you a clip, and then we'll take a break after this, where I first found the connection between anime and Ramune. Okay? There it is. There's anime and Ramune, okay? So what is Miyazaki's message? And please pay attention as you watch the film. And again, I hope you read Miyazaki Hayao, Yoshioka Shiro's article called The Heart of Japaneseness. History and nostalgia in Hayao Miyazaki's Spirited Away. Then what is meant, of course, by Japaneseness? He says on the very first page of the article, the key to understanding Spirited Away is Miyazaki's attitude toward Japanese history and tradition, especially his idea of Japaneseness. And that he wants to use the fantasy that you see in the film, in anime, to establish a link between contemporary and traditional Japanese culture. So that's the sort of his general theme, and I hope you kind of engaged with it and thought what he meant by this sort of link, to establish a link between contemporary and traditional Japanese culture. And in a sense, what we're going to do in this whole course is that very thing, trying to establish a link between what you see now, 2012, and so-called traditional Japan. And I think you probably already have started that in your explorations, that you can see a lot of interaction and coexistence of tradition with modernity.
The men who worked here worked very hard, most of them. They also played hard, and many of them liked to drink, and sometimes they had to sleep it off on the sidewalk, as you saw here. The Palace House, as it's called, is the largest lodging house. It held 500 people, and most of the men slept in 8 bunk rooms like this one. In the early mornings, taken about 5 a.m., the men went out on the street and sought work. Some of them had arrangements made in advance, others did not, and they had to wait for a street agent to tap them on the shoulder, so to speak, and get them a job for the day. As I say, there are fewer and fewer of these sorts of jobs, and they pay far less well. These pictures were taken at the end of the bubble period, so it was still it was the last heyday of Sanya. The construction work that men are involved in is something like you see in these pictures here. I happen to be in this work crew that worked on the expressway that's surrounded north of it.
this article here called Radioactive Rain and the American Umbrella. And this helps us a great deal. Starts off, you know, with the earthquake of March 11 and the expanding nuclear disaster that followed, our affluent post-war has finally reached the decisive end. Indeed, this closure has been clearly augured. Clearly, you know, we thought about it, and it looks to be happening this way all the way since the 1990s. The collapse of the bubble economy, the close of an era of single-party rule by the Liberal Democratic Party, the Great Hanshin earthquake, and Aum Shinrikyo sarin gas attacks that came in rapid succession in 1995. These events forced upon us the reality that the affluent post-war was over, and that means probably not just in Japan. Well, what's it mean here? And then after showing how the United States, and especially through covert actions through the CIA, was able to convince the Japanese government into believing in nuclear power. You know, it's Atoms for Peace movement, which is described here in detail, and encouraged the construction of what became 54 nuclear energy plants.
But literally in the United States, if there's a convenience store in your neighborhood, property values go down. They go down. They're not seen as value added to a neighborhood. They are value negative for a neighborhood. So they actually depress shop values, which is why when you go into certain places, you will not find full-fledged convenience stores. You find maybe a mobile market, right? A mini convenience store that doesn't have a lot in it, and probably you're pumping your own gas and doing most of the work that's there. Now we go to Japan, finally Circle K, to pay respect to Bill and Ted, the Hollywood version. And in Japan, as opposed to the United States, convenience stores are clean. You can use their bathrooms without, you know, being fearful of certain kinds of communicable diseases. They actually let you use their bathrooms. They want you to use their bathrooms. They ask you to ask them to use their bathrooms. They're comforting. There are so many people that when they come back to Japan, including major soccer stars, when they come back to Japan, the first place they go is not Starbucks. It's Lawson. And they buy a onigiri. Think about that.
As for the family, I've talked about family bonds, blood ties, and notions of traditional family, of course, might be put together in what I like to call the 3 Ps. There is the patriarch, the father figure, the husband, who is in control of the house, the so-called pillar of the family, the daikokubasha in Japanese, right? The pillar of the family, and also the head of the business if the family is running a business. Primogeniture is another important aspect. The line of succession is very clear. The important thing is to continue the family as you would continue a corporation. The family is indeed considered a corporate structure, and it's built along those lines. And to maintain the corporation, to maintain the family, you have to have heirs. You need a line of succession. And so in Japan, as in many other places, it's primogeniture, which is central. It's the firstborn son, and the son, not the daughter, takes over, unless it cannot happen.
Okay, so for our presentation, we decided to focus on okashi, which is Japanese snacks. And here in the introduction, we kind of, summarize what okashi means to the Japanese people. And, modern day okashi started off back towards the end of the Second World War, when a lot of the industries in Japan started growing and developing. And what it did was it took in a wide, as it says here, a wide variety of snacks from other cultures, like from the Western culture and from other Eastern cultures, and modifying it and alternating it so that it can be Japanese.
Basically, as opposed to the model they have here in Japan, back in America, where they usually drew the model from, it tends to be focused more around breakfast. But here in Japan, it tends to focus more around lunch and dinner. So basically, they have Japanese and Western style foods. Sometimes they specialize in Chinese and Italian as well. So they have a lot of different variety of food, but as opposed to the breakfast things that they have in America, they tend to focus more on eggs, sausage, bacon, pancakes, everything like that.
And then you can compare with friends. Oh, what's my message going to say today? Oh, what's your message? And it kind of like makes you excited for it every time.
Yeah. We actually went to Isaton to talk to like the workers, and they were telling us how skilled you have to be to actually work. You have to have prior skills, and you get trained there as well. And it's like an extensive training in order to create really good packages, and it kind of like proves the skill of the worker as well as the freshness and quality of the product. That's all incorporated in order to just show how good the product is and why you should buy it.